Hey y'all, it's me. It's your girl, the real deal. You already know. Like, share, and subscribe. What's up, real deal? How y'all doing out there? I know y'all keeping it real with this heat, right? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get into our reaction for tonight, this evening, morning, wherever you from, and we're gonna continue with Kouri Richins. She will remain incarcerated until trial, no bond. She was held without bond, allegedly accused of poisoning her husband with uh fentanyl. I keep saying fentanyl. I said it wrong, y'all. Fentanyl. But let's get into it.
Now, forgive me because with all these interviews, I'm not sure which one comes from which. You, in subsequent interviews, tell CL that she needs to give good enough details that will ensure that KORI gets convicted of murder, correct?
I don't know if I made that specific statement, but I did express to her that the information that she gave us needed to be specific enough that we could corroborate it and that it could be presented to a courtroom.
Okay. And that she was, quote, screwed at this years if there's not cooperation, correct?
No, I never made such statement.
Okay. Did you ever tell her this was her get out of jail free card?
No, I did not.
Okay. Are you sure about that?
Yes.
Now, at some point, CL tells you that in one of the interviews that KORI
Georgia is prospering because of the growth of the Latino
Interesting,
community, and the
y'all.
survey will play a
See, it's interesting. He leaving things out. Listen to this.
vital role in us being heard in that process.
This data will be used.
contacted her between December and February to obtain prescription pills for an investor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And she doesn't specifically state fentanyl at that point, correct?
Are you referring to CL?
I'm referring to CL.
I don't remember, but I don't believe so.
Okay. And in fact, and I'm guessing it's something where around the second or third interview, CL says that those first pills, well, never says those first pills are fentanyl, correct? It never says that KORI asked for fentanyl, correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
Sorry. In those first, in the first transaction, so initially CL tells you that there were 3 transactions prior to Eric's death, correct?
Yes, and what I have to say here is that
Well, that was a yes or no question.
But none of the information that we got from CL was perfectly chronological. We had to piece it together over multiple interviews to come to the conclusion that we came to.
Because you told her you needed something more specific to ensure that KORI gets convicted, right?
No, we told her that we needed more details on what she was talking about and specific dates and times.
Okay. But in the first one, she says there's 3 transactions prior to Eric's death, correct?
At some point in our interviews, she told us that there were transactions.
And she says that Kouri was only looking for prescription pills or hydrocodone pills, to be specific, correct?
CL referred to them as Roxy's.
Okay, what do you know Roxy's to be?
They can be different things in the drug world. They can either be counterfeit pills that are meant to look like a prescription pill, or they can be actual prescription pills, but generally they're known to be opiate-based drugs, whether illicit or pharmaceutical.
Okay, so something along the lines of hydrocodone or Oxycontin or something along those lines, correct?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And she specifically says that she was looking for $900 worth of fentanyl pills, correct?
I don't know if initially, but she did make the statement of $900 at one point in one of our interviews.
Okay. And she says that Kouri told her to leave the pills at an outdoor fire pit at the Midway house where there was cash, correct?
I don't know if she made that exact statement, but yes, she told us that at some point in part of the exchange that she was instructed to leave pills in an outdoor fire pit in a house in Midway.
Okay. And in fact, you sat there with her in this interview and did house searches, correct? Trying to figure out which house this was.
Yes.
Okay. Because she couldn't really tell you which house it was, correct?
She couldn't give us an address, but she was confident that she could find it if she could drive there.
Okay. And did you take her for a drive there?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever do any follow-up investigation on whether or not that house ever sold?
Yes.
Okay. And you know that that house sold sometime in January of 2022, correct?
What I understand, yes.
So Ms. Richins no longer owned that home or occupied that home or had access to that home in February, correct?
I don't know.
Well, the house was owned by somebody else, right?
Again, I don't know.
Well, you said it closed in January of 2022.
From the information that I was told from other people, other investigators that had looked into that, I was told that Ms. Richins owned the house at some point and that it sold at some point. I don't know dates exactly.
Be important if CL's telling you that she had access to the home and was there in February?
Possibly.
That might be a good fact to know. Okay. CL then does subsequent interviews, correct?
Yes, we had multiple interviews with her.
And after being told that, as your words are, correct? She now says that it was specifically fentanyl that Kouri asked for, correct?
Correct.
And that she didn't actually take the pills to that house in Midway. It was a hand-to-hand transaction, correct?
Like I said, she went back and forth on her memory on which instances referred to which transactions. And ultimately, she told us that she was sure that the first transaction of fentanyl was a hand-to-hand transaction in her driveway.
Okay. And was what's been referred to as acquaintance 3, was that in regard to that transaction?
No.
Okay.
It was the second transaction.
Were you able to corroborate, was anyone with her that could corroborate that she saw CL hand Kouri drugs?
Not that I know of.
And then she states that now there was a third transaction that occurred after Eric's death, correct?
She didn't make the statement that it was after Eric's death, but she told us there were 3 total transactions.
So the information contained in the state's amended information, you don't know where that came from?
Which information are you referring
That
to?
she purchased drugs after Eric's death?
Yes, I do know where it came from.
Okay. And you're saying CL did not sell drugs to Kouri after Eric's death?
CL could not remember specific dates and did not make mention that the transaction happened after Eric's death. But when presented with digital evidence from other witnesses, she confirmed that that was most likely correct.
Okay. So she just agreed with your scenario of events, correct?
No, in fact, several times during our interview, she told us that as we presented her more information, it helped her remember more.
Okay. So as you're telling her to be more specific, you're providing her with information that you're gaining in, and she's saying, now I remember. Accurate?
Yeah.
All right. You also testified that you interviewed two of Eric's best friends, right?
Yes.
And during one of those interviews, so I'm going to go back to CL for just a second. On this transaction that you allege that this check was used for, or the state alleges this check was used for, you testified that she picked up the check, there was and cashed it, right?
Correct.
And drove to the Maverick and purchased fentanyl.
She didn't drive, but she was.
Someone drove her, okay?
Yes.
And the person with her corroborates that.
Correct.
And that third witness never saw CL give those drugs to Kouri, correct? Acquaintance 3 never saw that?
Acquaintance 3 didn't tell us that he ever saw that, no.
Okay. In fact, there's no independent witness to corroborate that CL gave Ms. Kouri those drugs, correct?
No eyewitnesses that we have identified, but the investigation is ongoing.
And CL is currently out of custody, right?
Depends on your definition of custody, but she's not incarcerated, no.
Not incarcerated, she's on, I think, ankle monitor and not to leave the county, right?
Correct.
But following your interviews with her, she was released from jail.
Not immediately, no. She worked with the prosecutor in the other county where her drug court is and came to a resolution as to those charges against her. And part of that was being released on ankle monitor.
Okay, so in exchange for the testimony, or not testimony, in exchange for the information that she provided to you, and a deal was worked out where she was placed, essentially released from jail on the order to show cause, correct?
I don't know the specifics of what went on between the prosecutor and CL.
Okay.
But subsequent to our interviews, we reached out to the prosecutor's office and let them know that she was being cooperative. After that, I was not involved in any decisions regarding her release.
Okay, because that's up to the judge and whatnot.
Correct.
But you did communicate that to prosecutors,
Yes,
that she gave you the information you needed.
that she was being cooperative with our investigation, yes.
All right, I want to turn now to your interview, and I'm going to use initials. Are you okay with that? You had an interview with one of Eric's friends. His initials are JS. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. That interview occurred about April 20th. Is that correct?
that seems right. I don't know a specific date, but
Okay. And during that interview, he discussed, or you discussed with him, that he and another individual were essentially Eric's best friends, correct?
Ms. Lozera, my apologies.
Yes.
April 20th of which year?
Oh, 2023.
Three.
I apologize.
Thank you.
At any point during that interview, did JS mention that Eric had said that at any point during he and Kouri's marriage, he was concerned that Kouri was attempting to poison him?
I don't recall, but I don't think so.
In fact, you present him essentially 3 scenarios of what could have happened to Eric, correct? That he potentially did it to himself knowingly, that someone else did it to him, or that it was accidental, right? And you specifically ask him if he thinks Kouri would have done it, and he says, no, in my gut, I don't believe so, correct?
I don't know if that was a direct quote, but yes, he said that he didn't believe that she would have done it.
And he also states during that interview that at the time of his death, Eric and Kouri's marriage was in a really good place.
Yes.
Correct? Now, he also details or talks about a falling out that he and Eric had over the course of their friendship, correct?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
And that Eric and his other friend that he refers to in this interview actually had a falling out right before
We're good, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Lozera?
No.
You can step down, sir. Thank
Thank you.
you. The state's,
Calls Chris Kotradimus.
sir, if you'd step in front of Brittany, we'll get you sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, to the pains and penalties of perjury.
Sir, could you please and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Chris Kotradimus. Last name is Kotrodimus.
Thank you. Mr. Kotradimus, how are you employed at this point in time?
I own a private investigation firm,
What's that called?
M20 Solutions,
How long have you been the owner of that firm?
about 7 months.
What did you do prior to owning that business?
I was a police officer for over 23 years.
Where did you work as a
Worked with I started in Carolina, Utah, and took a position with Salt Lake City Police Department where I worked there. In 2017, I took a position with the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office on the homicide team there, and until my retirement in December of 2022.
Do you have any specialized training or experience with forensic digital evidence?
I do, yes.
Could you briefly explain what that is?
Sure. So I've attended several formal courses, one being a Cellbrite Certified Operator course, a Cellbrite Certified Physical Analyzer course. I've also attended a 40-hour
As you were analyzing the forensic data from that extraction, were you able to observe any noticeable patterns of deletion from that phone?
It appears that there is some deletion in that device.
Okay, and can you describe what is being deleted in that phone?
It looks like there's gaps in things like web history, web searches, particularly the call log. When a person leaves a call or a text, those are recorded in the call log of the phone. And there are there's messaging that is included in the carrier report that I would expect to see also logged within the device that are not in the device.
Okay, so you're seeing those in the carrier records, but not on the device themselves.
Multiple calls and texts to an individual, I would expect to also see the call log of the device itself. And in a lot of instances, particularly there's a lot of that is missing.
And from the carrier records, are you able to tell who those calls were going to?
Yes,
Who was that?
there are several people, but as it relates, one that stood out was just that has been mentioned as CL.
In those carrier records, were there logs of calls made in January of 2022?
I don't recall January.
Did you analyze a forensic extraction of a second iPhone belonging to the defendant that was seized in May of 2023?
Yes.
When did activity?
The activity on that phone started shortly after her original phone was seized in April of 2022.
Were you able to observe internet searches on that phone?
Yes.
And did you a PowerPoint of some of those searches?
I did.
And just for the court and counsel's reference, this is docket item 141. Were you able to tell when those searches were done?
Yes.
How did you do that?
There is a date and time stamp of the history, the web history. So for instance, if you visit a website and you click through it using your device, it will report what date and time that did that connected to that website.
I see. On April 18th of 2022, internet site of an article entitled "What Happens to Deleted Messages." On May 10th of 2022, did that phone access a site for an article entitled "How Do Police and Forensic Analysts Recover Deleted Data from Phones"?
Yes.
Did that phone was a query placed in that phone, quote, "Can cops, period, uncover deleted, period, messages, iPhone," close quote?
Yes.
Did that phone search, quote, "How to, period, permanently delete information from an iPhone remotely," close quote?
Yes.
Did that phone search, quote, "Luxuries for the rich in America"?
It did.
Did that phone search, quote, "If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as," close quote?
Yes.
Were you able to tell when those things were searched?
The search themselves, there was no date and time reported for the individual search. However, I found corresponding websites to those searches that did have the web history.
And was there a certain time frame that these searches were made? Can you describe what that was?
It's typically between, well, shortly after her original phone was seized. So from middle of April of 2022 through, memory serves me right, about August of 2022 off and on.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned your training with cell phone mapping using cell tower data.
Yes.
Have you implemented in your review of the evidence in this case?
I have.
Can you explain just briefly cell phone mapping is done using cell phone,
Sure.
cell tower data?
Sure. Sorry, I look that way. I'm used to talking to a jury. So it's mapping is accomplished by taking call detail records that contain tower location in them and putting them into a piece of software that will visually show you a location on a map of which tower that device was accessing when it made or received a call or a text. So it takes lines of data and creates a map out of it.
Okay. And is that plotted on like a program like Google Earth?
It is.
Okay. And are you able to tell from when a phone connects to a tower? Is there any directionality to that, approximately where that phone is transmitting from?
Yes. Yeah. So the cell phone, the companies report which tower the device is utilizing and which is an estimated range to that, which is a bit ambiguous. However, it will tell us at least what side of the tower that the device was located when it made or received the call.
How many sectors are there on each cell tower?
3.
And so if a phone is connecting to a tower through a certain sector, tell that it's someplace where that's, for lack of a better word, broadcasting or collecting signals.
Yes. So we can determine the orientation of the device to certain locations.
I see.
Yeah.
Did you map data from CL's phone extraction?
I did.
Were you able to track that phone's movements on February 11th?
Yes,
At any time, was it at or near a Maverick gas station in Draper, Utah?
it is.
And are you aware of that location in this investigation?
I am. This is the location that CL had indicated to detectives that she bought drugs on behalf of the defendant.
Do you recall approximately what time of day that was? It was there?
She shows up on that tower near that Maverick at about 6:49 p.m. and remains there until about 8 p.m. 2022.
Does that phone make any calls or say while at that location?
It did.
And to anyone notable to this investigation?
Yes, 2 people.
Who was that?
One other acquaintance in which she had purchased the drugs from, and CL was also texting with the defendant.
Well, she was at a gas station in Draper, narcotics.
Correct.
On that day, did the phone go to a location in Heber City?
It did.
Was the mapping that you did CL's phone consistent with what CL gave to law enforcement regarding that first drug purchase?
Yes.
Were you able to track CL's phone movements on March 9th of 2022
Yes,
in Francis, Utah on that day?
it was.
Was it ever at or near the same Maverick in? Were there any communications from the phone at that time while it was at the Maverick?
Yes.
Did it communicate belonging to a person relevant to this investigation?
It did.
Who was that?
At the Maverick, it communicated with, I guess, corroborating witnesses to the drug purchase on the 9th. When the device was utilizing it in Francis, it was about mid-9th, and CL's.
All right. Yeah, it's getting good. Yeah, let me get
phone
rid.
was
I'm on
in
string yard now.
communication with the defendant's phone.
It's Utah.
Correct.
Did the phone go to a location in Midway, Utah on or about that day?
Yes.
Are the movements that you for CL's cell phone on March 9th of 2022 consistent with the information she gave to law enforcement in this investigation? Finally, I want to speak with you briefly about Mr. Eric Richins' phone. Did you analyze a forensic extraction?
I did.
When was the last use recorded from Eric's phone?
From memory, I believe it was PM on March 3rd, 2022.
And are the times that are on the extract populated in the Celebrite download, are those, what time zone are those given in?
Typically, the extraction is provided 0.
And so do you have to, so can you just briefly explain what UTC 0 is?
Right. So UTC 0 is Greenwich Mean Time. It's an effort by utilize investigations to try and keep everybody on the same time zone. Utah is in -7 daylight time, and we are in -6 in daylight savings time. So in this case, from November of 2022 to about March 13th, I'm sorry, November of 2021, March 13th, 2022, in Utah.
Okay. So if those times are given on that download as UTC -5, that would be
Correct. It would be 2 hours ahead of local.
so to adjust for Mountain Standard Time, you would have to go back 2 hours.
You'd have to subtract 2 hours. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And that's what gave you, can you repeat that the last time that Eric's phone was used on March 3rd?
I believe it was 9:58 p.m. on March 3rd.
I just have one. Thank you, Mr. Kotradimas. At this time, thanks.
Just you testified there are essentially two explanations for why things might be missing. One in a download. One is that it's not captured in the
Oh, Lord. Sorry about that, audience. I don't have a clue what's going on. But I do have StreamYard.
in this case, all you can say definitively is that it's missing, correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to movement, that could be any device that is attached to the phone through an app, correct?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And so you can't say, looking at what you analyzed, exactly what device that was, correct?
So far, no.
Okay. And you can't tell where that device was in terms of location, correct?
Correct.
So it's possible that that could have been a device attached from some other location, but the phone's recording it, correct? But it's possible if it's connected to an app.
It depends.
Okay.
So it would be impossible outside a certain range.
Okay. And there's a number of different ways to, or I am not an expert in this, so there's programs or extractions that can be done on phones, correct? Or different. Did you perform an independent extraction on this phone?
I did not.
Okay, or on any of the phones you've talked about today?
No.
Did you analyze any data prior to January of 2022 on either CL's phone or either phone, or I guess the first phone belonging to Ms. Richins?
I don't believe I did.
Okay, were you asked at a,
Not necessarily, no.
okay, were you range of interest? Okay. And so you didn't cross-reference any communication or communication between CL and KORI prior to January of 2022, correct?
Correct.
So it could be that they communicated all the time, you wouldn't have known.
Yes.
So this is just a connection between the two. Were you made aware of when warrant was, or when the first phone was seized?
Yes.
Okay. Copy of the search?
No.
Okay. Were you made aware that the warrant included evidence of homicide that they were looking at?
No.
And in that first phone, prior to Eric passing away, were you able to review any search of the web browser?
Whose device?
First device
Of
Ms.
Ms. Reed. Yes. Yes.
Okay. And did you was related to fentanyl on that?
No, not that I found it. There were available to
And
look at.
okay, no searches related to prisons either?
No, not in that time frame.
No searches related to deleting messages?
No.
And so all the searches came from the second phone, correct?
The web searches mentioned, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And phone that was issued for the first phone, correct?
That was,
Because
yes.
that's the
So
phone
that
she got
was-
as a replacement, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I just want to return to this mapping that you discussed. Did you look at the mapping on the second phone of Ms. Richins?
I did not.
So to compare Ms. Richins' phone to CL's location at any point, correct?
They did.
Okay,
Yes. They
but you
did.
couldn't do it? Or didn't do it?
The records, the mapping location for those call detail records through Verizon are no longer available
On the second phone?
on either phone.
What?
Okay, so you were able to get them off of CL's phone, but because of Verizon, you weren't able to Ms. Richins' phone?
Correct.
And on that March 9th date, you discussed midday, Maverick, time, was she at that Maverick?
It was about 3
Then-
p.m.
After she
She was
To Francis.
she was in Francis around midday. She was at the Maverick at about 2:33 p.m.
Okay. Did she go back to Francis?
She went to Heber.
And she lives in here. I don't think I have any other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, anything further?
No, thank you.
So you can step down. Thank you. Ms. Cassell.
Yes, Your Honor, State Culprit Carrington.
These are the three witnesses, y'all, that the prosecutor want to use at trial, okay?
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, pains and penalties of perjury?
I'm gonna try to get this a little bit.
Okay.
That I don't know about.
Okay. Two bank accounts that belonged to the defendant.
Yes.
And what is servicing a debt? What does that mean?
That would be a term that would explain that there's a debt outstanding and service would be the payments on that. If I have a credit card and I have a monthly payment or I have a balance due, my payment toward that credit card is called servicing my debt.
Okay. And were you able to determine which debt the defendant was servicing in December of 2021, for instance?
Yes.
How much was that?
The debt payments were about $252,000 in that month.
Say that one more time.
The debt payments that she made in 21, the 4 payments, and those 94 payments totaled $252,000.
Is there anything that you found significant about those debt payments?
Yes.
What was that?
They were not to 94 individual entities. Some of them were weekly payments. For example, I know that she has an outstanding debt during that time of $5,438 that was required to be paid weekly on a debt. She has a $600 payment that is made daily for a period of time during December. And on most of those debts, the large majority of those debts are ours. Some of them are credit cards.
And this was in a account you looked at.
That's
correct?
just in one account, yes.
Do you remember what account that was?
That's the account 6577.
Okay. Were you able to determine current payments that were coming out of 6577? Did I say that number correct? Yes.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
I know of one account that she has that had sued her, and they filed suit in New York in December 9th of 2021.
Okay. But, to ask you about that, I will ask you about that one in a minute. But
Okay.
were you able to look at the bank account and determine whether or not she was current on her payments or whether her payments were going through correctly?
If she was current on her payments, I can say about those payments that several of them did not clear the bank. And
Why was that?
she was in the negative in that account from a good part of that month. She was $22,000 in the hole for a good part of that month.
So you noticed that at least for that account in that month that some of the payments to the hard money lenders were not going through?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you notice any charges for overdraft fees or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what did you notice about that?
They were $25 each, and sorry, I don't recall what the cumulative number is for that, but there were dozens.
Okay. Now I want to ask you You said that there was a lawsuit that you were familiar with out of New York.
Yes.
Can you explain what you found out about that?
So in that case, they did file the agreement. And so from that, it's that Ms. Richins used receivables of $87,000 are her potential revenue. It's performed or earned, and she's expecting to her company as revenues. So that's $87,000 that's stated in the case, in the document that they filed with it. And that
In November, that did not clear. Do you remember?
remember that there were checks, yes.
Okay. Checks were deposited. Do you remember if there were any payments made out?
Oh, no, yeah.
Or where they were transferred?
I don't recall specifically, no.
Okay. But there was money transferred out between the time the check was deposited that didn't clear and the time it, okay. And then in December of 2021, any checks that were deposited, a check for $10,000 and from the Navy Federal Credit Union.
Yes,
And what happened to that check?
that did not clear as well.
Okay. And checks take a while not to clear, right? Is that it's credited to time in between the credit and the coming back not cleared. Is that right?
Yes, but it depends on the relationships between those financial institutions. Sometimes they'll clear,
Mhm.
sometimes
You're
they'll take a few days.
And these 5 days. So would that be? about
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
I remember that there were two that did not clear, and they both came from Ms. Richins' Navy Federal Credit Union account.
So these were by the on the Navy Federal Credit Union account and deposited into her.
That's correct.
That didn't. Was there money time that the check was deposited and the time it came as unpaid? Were there any transactions out of 6577 account?
Yes, there were.
Were they?
I-
But there was a time when the money.
That's correct.
In 657, do you recall, I know you tested overdrawn at the end of the year. Do you recall if it was overdrawn again prior to Eric's death?
I do. I don't remember the amount, but it was
Overdrawn?
yes.
Do you, and again, I want to 5244. And I
Ms.
think-
Cassell, I think we can move on.
Okay. Let me ask you about the life insurance policies. Are you familiar with life insurance policies
Yes.
on Eric's life?
Yes.
How many life insurance policies were there on Eric's life at the time of his death?
I believe there were 6.
Okay. And
7.
I mean, what were they? Can you explain what the life insurance policies were?
Yes. The first was through Minnesota Life for $347,000. And that was what is typically called a home mortgage policy, in which if the insured passes away, the home's paid off. And they write it at the amount of what the loan balance was at the time the policy's taken out. And so whatever the loan is at the time of death, I believe that loan is like 72%. They'll pay 72% of the outstanding loan. And so that one was paid.
Okay. And
then there's a life insurance policy that Eric and his business partner had on each other, basically, and that's in coordination with a buy-sell agreement on their business. And so if one of them passes away, the other would be the beneficiary of that life insurance policy.
Let me just ask you about that instead of going through one at a time. How, besides the life insurance was on Eric's business, what was the amount of money that Eric's life was insured for at the time of his death?
About $1.2 million, aside from the business buy sell policy.
Ooh-wee.
And are you familiar with any attempt to change the beneficiary of the business policy?
I'm aware that that is the report, yes.
And what was the report?
That on New Year's Day of 2022, that in New York Life's online portal, someone had logged in and had changed the beneficiaries on that.
Okay, y'all, to make it interesting, I'm gonna stop it right here. Woo! Insurance. That's sad that you can't let nobody know how many insurance policy you have and who got what over what. Yes. But all right then, y'all like, share, and subscribe. This is your girl, the real deal Anita Gill. When the trial card starts, I'll let y'all know. This is very interesting.